Time for the Slay Word of the Week. You know we have to level up that vocab, people. That's why slay it. At home, on the job, in the side hustle, level up, people, because we have to take the next step forward in life and we have to always be ready, especially in the times we live in, okay? The word this week is dauntless, D-A-U-N-T-L-E-S-S, dauntless, okay? It's an adjective. You know what that means. It modifies or describes a noun. We all know that by now. It can be traced back to the Latin word domare, meaning to tame or subdue, and it was first used in the 14th century. It was used to describe horses until the late 16th century when people began, to use it to describe people. Dauntless. It means incapable of being intimidated, okay? Fearless. That's right, folks. That describes a whole lot of people you know, and if you aren't dauntless, you better get dauntless because we're up against some difficult times right now. All right, dauntless. All right, now we're going to use it in a sentence, okay? When she was falsely accused of doing something wrong at school, her mother was dauntless in her efforts to get justice for her child. Or how about this? He became a voting rights activist and was dauntless in his efforts to make sure the people in his neighborhood were able to cast their votes freely and fairly. Dauntless, okay? It means incapable of being intimidated, fearless. We're going to use it when it comes to current events where we know it is extremely appropriate. The Democrats are dauntless in their efforts to try and get witnesses and documents on the table in the impeachment of the president. Let's hope they're successful because all of our lives are at stake as a result of this mess going down in Washington, particularly if you're a person of color. We are not safe. Here it is again. If America is going to pull itself out of this global warming mess that is spiraling out of control, we are going to have to be dauntless in our efforts to make some very difficult changes, like totally giving up plastic. Dauntless, it means incapable of being intimidated, fearless. I'll use it in my news every day this week. Thanks for watching. I am Carol Angela Davis. Okay, the Bulletin of Atomic Scientists, well, it has moved its symbolic doomsday clock forward to 100 seconds to midnight, forward being the problem. That is the closest to catastrophe that the scientists have ever judged the world to be. Scientists say the planet is facing a simultaneous double threat. The first, the threat of nuclear weapons causing civil collapse. The second, the climate crisis. These scientists now calling our current environment profoundly unstable, people. All right, they say people are confused by the rise of cyber-enabled disinformation campaigns, and they say this makes the two threats even worse. That brings me to our slay word, dauntless, because we have to be fearless in our move towards making sure we are safe and our planet is safe. Last year, people, was the second hottest on record for the Earth. The 2019 average temperature was 1.1 degrees centigrade warmer than the average between 1850 and 1900, which was before the ramp up of fossil fuels. So this is no joke. Mary Robinson, well, she's the chair of an independent group of global leaders called the Elders. She is also the former president of Ireland and former UN High Commissioner of Human Rights. She says countries that don't try and eliminate the greenhouse gas emissions that are warming up the planet, folks, she says they are issuing, quote, a death sentence for humanity, unquote. That's right. And while she says this, she also says this of nuclear threats. While there is public pressure to help save the climate, there is no public pressure when it comes to nuclear threats. And that's a serious problem, folks. Robinson adds, as long as nuclear weapons are available, it is inevitable that they will one day be used either by accident, by miscalculation, or by design. I'm Carol Angela Davis. You're either part of the problem or part of the solution. Get ready. Let's live. Thanks for watching. Turns out the NRA is running the country. Emails from NRA-affiliated people in the Interior Department show the gun group is shaping federal land policy. The NRA spent roughly $30 million to help Donald Trump get elected. That comes to us from the Guardian newspaper, which says it all started in the fall of 2017. That's when NRA lobbyist Benjamin Cassidy left the NRA to work at the U.S. Interior Department. It oversees hundreds of millions of acres of federal land. Our land, yes, okay. Cassidy then proceeded to give the NRA unprecedented access to these lands. It includes helping an NRA official join the International Wildlife Conservation Council. That council helps shape policy regarding international recreational hunting. Then there's Susan LaPierre, wife of NRA leader Wayne LaPierre. She was appointed to the board of the National, you ready for this? Parks Foundation. Wow. Okay, now we should also tell you that our slave word is dauntless for fearless. We must be dauntless in our efforts to save our country and to also save ourselves, frankly. Now, the International Wildlife Conservation Council, it is now stacked with pro-hunting advocates. Okay, it is promoting big game trophy hunting overseas. That, of course, is a long-time NRA priority. Cassidy, we should tell you, also reached out to the director of the NRA's Conservation, Wildlife, and Natural Resources Program to help him with a plan to limit recreational shooting at the Sonoran Desert National Monument in Arizona, and they did not limit a thing. Target shooting in the Sonoran Desert National Monument has damaged archaeological artifacts. It has destroyed saguaro cacti and harmed other natural and cultural resources. But today, with the help of the National Rifle Association, folks, roughly 90% of the monument is now open to recreational shooting. Under federal ethics guidelines, government employees are prohibited from giving, quote, preferential treatment to any private organization or individual, unquote. So then, of course, Cassidy was investigated. He quietly stepped down from his post. He took a job as director of government affairs at Safari Club International. That's a national organization that promotes trophy hunting in the United States and around the world. I'm Carol Angela Davis. Thanks for watching. Be vigilant. Well, if cruelty is his specialty, Donald Trump must be having a field day this week. I'm Carol Angela Davis. Okay, he told us he would not cut the safety net that Americans need, but now he has a plan to do just that. And if you voted for him, please be quiet. You're the one who gave him carte blanche to give the billionaires all those tax cuts, and now you're going to have to pay for them, and you may have to pay for them with your life. How about that? Okay, Trump's latest proposal takes on Social Security beneficiaries who have a disability. How particularly cruel, all right? He wants to cut Social Security benefits by $2.6 billion over 10 years, and it means you may have to reprove your disability every 2 years, folks. So if you're in a wheelchair, hey, that's your tough luck. If you're blind, oh well, your problem. If you have mental issues, oops. How about that? Under his plans, hundreds of thousands of people could lose benefits even though their condition is unchanged. And that brings me to our slave word, dauntless for fearless. This man is dauntless and no act is too cruel for him. You better be dauntless in your efforts to vote. Do not forget that, folks, okay? Now, in case you drank that Kool-Aid and you believe there's a lot of people living out there just living on Social Security benefits, having themselves a good old time, know this. America has among the strictest eligibility standards in the world, folks. 60% of applications are denied, and tens of thousands of people die each year just waiting on their benefits, all right? And when they get them, they're not getting a whole bunch of money, folks. The average benefit is about $1,200 a month for Social Security disability, and it's only about $536 a month for Social Security income. And the Trump administration's own accounting system says that in order to cut this $2.6 billion in benefits over 10 years, it's going to cost $1.8 billion to administer the program. Okay? So clearly saving money is not the issue. Okay, so what is? All right, obviously saving lives is not the issue either. So what is? Well, probably the fact that Trump can do whatever he wants to you, whenever he wants to do it. So you better be dauntless, folks, and vote. Do not get played. I'm Carol Angela Davis. In the news, more drama in Mississippi at Parchman Prison there as the 9th inmate has died at the Mississippi State Penitentiary. And that's just so far this year, folks. The prisoner was found hanging in his cell and unresponsive. No foul play is suspected, but I guess that could depend on what you mean by foul play. At least 3 of the previous deaths were attributed to violence. 2 inmates killed in altercations. Video footage has surfaced, and it reportedly shows inmates living in what is said to be a condemned portion of the correctional facility. That section floods, and inmates said to be splashing around in muddy, shallow water. It also has widespread black mold. That's what's being reported. Plus, no electricity, working plumbing, no heat, and no beds for inmates. Here's one woman's take. She calls herself an activist, and here's her take on what she's seen at Parchman Prison.
Please give me a few minutes. This is so important. We just got word that there were 3 more people found dead at Parchman Prison. Last time we were there, the death toll was up to almost 20. Now I dare say it's close to 30, and this is within the month. Please, guys, please bring some attention to these issues. These brothers are dropping left and right. I'm hearing that the inmates are in super inhumane conditions. Feces is piled up. There's no running water. The guards have checked out. The guards at Parchman Prison are the lowest officers paid. 70% of them are women in these conditions, and they are making $24,300 at an entry level. This is beyond unacceptable.
Okay. There are about 3,600 inmates at Parchman Prison. That's about 26% of Mississippi's 19,000 incarcerated inmates. Ridiculous. Bringing me to our slave word, dauntless, for fearless, because you really have to be dauntless to try and enact prison reform in America. So we thank you, Kim Kardashian. We appreciate your work. Now, apparently, there are unverified reports on social media claiming that corrections officers are at the center of the violence. And one prison reform activist says the guards have been giving inmates keys to cells. Yikes. Other inmates have taken to Facebook to cry out for help, saying they are not safe within the prison system. They say it's because correctional officers have ties to gangster disciples and People's Nation gangs. The Mississippi Department of Corrections, you should know, and you're probably not going to be surprised to hear, they've been under fire before. In 2012, a prison riot over there at Adams County Correctional Facility, it left a guard dead. And then in 2014, former Mississippi Department of Corrections Commissioner Chris Epps, well, he was charged with bribery, money laundering, and wire fraud charges involving, it's ridiculous, potentially hundreds of millions of taxpayer dollars. Seriously? Now, I'd be willing to bet by now he's in prison, but I guarantee you he figured out a way not to go to Parchman. I'm Carol Angela Davis. Thanks for watching. Have a good day. Oh, and please, if you like this, please follow me and share. This is insane. I am Carol Angela Davis. You know, I've got your news, folks. This is just so stupid. Do you know that some of the newly installed panels of the border wall, you know, that's the wall, the big deal, the big brouhaha wall down at the border with Mexico, do you know some of the panels have fallen over? Yes, they were blown over by the wind. They're worried about people crawling under the wall. They're worried about people crawling over the wall. Might even be worried about people climbing through the wall. But guess what? It turns out that none of that is a problem because the wall's just going to fall over on its own. All that money for nothing. That's right, folks. It was not a hurricane. No. I said wind. No, it was not a tornado. No, this was a regular old 37-mile-per-hour blast of wind, folks. Now, the wind that knocked down the wall, okay, guess what? Now, people who study wind, okay, they say that damaging winds are winds that exceed 50 to 60 miles per hour. This one was 37, not even close, but this knocking down wind, well, they consider it to be a moderate gale, folks. That's all it is. It means it would make whole trees sway, and it would be difficult to walk if you're walking against the wind, but you can walk, okay? All right, so a concrete wall should be able to stay. Here's a look at it. See, the wind wasn't that bad, was it? It's crazy. Okay, it's just shoddy workmanship, people. That's what happens when you hire your friends instead of hiring competent people to do the job. But then that's also what happens when you're doing a job that you shouldn't be doing in the first place. Okay, the wall was being worked on as part of the new border project launched by President Donald Trump. You know, in March of 2018, the Trump administration secured $1.6 billion, baby, from Congress for projects at the border for existing designs of approximately 100 miles of new and replacement walls. Don't ever let the U.S. government tell you they don't have any money, because the U.S. government is awash with cash. They just don't know how to spend it. That brings me to our slave word, dauntless, for fearless. Someone who walks 500 miles across God knows how far to get to the U.S. is dauntless. That is dauntless for fearless, okay? Instead of spending money to keep them out, we should be taking that same money that we wasted on that piece of border wall that was so weak it was equal to nothing, and we should put that money back in their country so they can stay home with their friends and their family, which we all know is what they'd rather do anyway, okay? Now, that's why people take a dangerous trek, because they have to. All right, that weak wall that fell was new construction. That was the new wall, people. It was designed to improve existing sections of the wall. Yes, I did use the word improve in that sentence. It had recently been set in a new concrete foundation. Yes, I said concrete and foundation in Calexico, California, and the concrete had not yet cured, I'll say. I'd be willing to bet that they pour border wall all the time, and sometimes when the concrete, most of the time when the concrete hasn't cured, it doesn't just plop over, okay, in a mild wind. All right, so earlier this month, the administration announced that the wall had reached the 100-mile mark. Can't wait for the rest of that stuff to blow down. Most of the construction was replacing barriers with newer enhanced designs. About a half-mile was constructed in that Rio Grande Valley where no wall previously existed, and now we know why. I'm Carol Angela Davis. Thanks for watching. I am Carol Angela Davis. You know, I've got your cannabis news. We're going to go to the state of Illinois, where, recreational cannabis was legalized on January 1st of this year. We're going to go directly to Chicago because in Chicago, there is a move to protect people from being evicted from public housing, even if they use cannabis. So remember, it's still illegal under federal law, so it can't be used legally on public housing grounds that receive federal money. But now the Board of Commissioners of the Chicago Housing Authority has a policy to change that, to, quote, work with residents, participants, applicants, and landlords to provide information and guidance in their efforts to exercise their rights under local law without jeopardizing their housing under federal law, unquote. It's important, folks. Last November, about 63,000 households managed by the Housing Authority did get a letter, and that letter said that if they use marijuana, that was grounds for eviction. So they really have to have that in the forefront of their mind. Now, under this new policy, the possession, distribution, cultivation, or use of marijuana in public housing facilities, you should know it can still cause a review of their residential status. However, each case is now going to be considered on an individual basis, and any mitigating factors are going to be taken into account. So what are mitigating factors? Well, they include the time, nature, and extent of the conduct, the relationship of the conduct to the disability of a family member, its impact on others, the impact of a proposed action on family members, folks, the viability of limiting a negative action to certain users rather than the entire family. This is what we call common sense. And any factors that might indicate a reasonable probability of favorable future conduct of the resident or participant, including rehabilitation. How do we thank the state of Illinois that has really gone and looked at best practices? You can see that they've done it around the nation and really come up with some common sense approaches, because at the end of the day, they know we are dealing with people's lives and with families. I'm Carol Angela Davis. Have a good day. I am Carol Angela Davis with your cannabis news. I'll tell you that Illinois is in a class by itself when it comes to weed. Now travelers passing through the airports don't need to worry about the TSA if they're holding. You can get Amnesty. Just drop your weed in the box at the airport or your weed products and keep on going. Local officials there at O'Hare International and Midway Airport saying that they have installed so-called cannabis amnesty boxes. You're going to find them at the TSA checkpoints. They're receptacles just like the ones if you have like water bottles or stuff like that. You just toss your marijuana or marijuana products in there and keep on going before boarding that plane, where things could get very dicey if you don't do that. You do have to wonder where all that ditched weed does end up, though, don't you? I don't know, probably the same place where all the makeup ends up. We don't know where that is. Well, Illinois, as you know, it is the 11th state to legalize recreational marijuana. The state's cannabis law taking effect on January 1, 2020, and allowing adults age 21 and older to possess up to 1 ounce of marijuana. That law also are going to result in the pardons of about 100,000 people who were previously convicted of low-level, non-violent marijuana offenses. As for the TSA, well, it says its screening procedures are focused on identifying threats and that officials do not search for cannabis or any other federally illegal drugs. But they say, and I quote, in the event a substance appears to be marijuana or a cannabis-infused product, that includes gummies, we're required by federal law to notify law enforcement. Now, having said that, the TSA also says it's going to defer to local Chicago police on such matters, and the local police, well, they say they're not going to bother anyone in possession of marijuana as long as it's within the statute. Best advice, of course, ditch the weed and send it into Never Never Land and into the hands of whoever gets all that stuff. I'm Carol Angela Davis. Thanks for watching. I am Carol Angela Davis, and I've got your cannabis news, and I'm coming to you from Detroit, my hometown. A possible extension of the city's moratorium on commercial cannabis activity, at least until March 31st of this year. After Michigan voted to legalize recreational cannabis, that was in November 2018, local governors were given the opportunity to prohibit marijuana businesses from operating in their jurisdiction. Well, the Detroit City Council passed a measure to opt out of the legal cannabis industry until January 31st, 2020, which you know is just around the corner. But now one councilman says, more time is needed to develop a social equity program. Detroit wants to give city residents an opportunity to participate in the newly formed legal marijuana market. That man is Councilman Tate, and he says it's clear Detroit's medical marijuana industry is overwhelmingly owned and operated by individuals who don't live in the city and who take their dollars back to their communities. Tate adds it's not enough for Detroit residents to simply hold security jobs and floor sweeping jobs in this industry. He says meaningful and sustainable access for Detroiters has to be the goal. You can't blame the man now, can you? Meanwhile, there's a lot of drama going on in Detroit. Police in Detroit are blaming the illicit marijuana trade for a spike in violence. The police chief there estimating that 60% of the recent shootings and homicides in the city are related to the illicit marijuana trade. Now, that is Police Chief Craig. He says there are more shootings involving sales of black market marijuana than any other drug, folks. And guess what? That includes cocaine and heroin. Wow, they're going crazy there in Detroit, okay? Now, he also says the legalization of cannabis makes illicit transactions very difficult to prosecute if they are under 2 ounces because, of course, 2 ounces is legal. Now the police are targeting the black market sellers and buyers who are carrying guns to try and keep that community safe. I'm Carol Angela Davis. Thanks for watching. I am Carol Angela Davis. You know, I've got your cannabis news now. The Cherokee Nation's Hoskins Tribal Association, it wants its 4,000 workers in its Tahlequah, Oklahoma government offices to please stop worrying about marijuana. The group saying there is simply no need to fear on-the-job testing or test administered through the job application process when it comes to THC. The tribe saying it is committed to ensuring support for all valid physician-supported treatments. Now, tribal sovereignty regulations do allow Native governments to set their own laws when it comes to cannabis and marijuana production, consumption, and distribution. Many Native governments have resisted the call to regulate cannabis because they feel like it will only worsen the grave addiction problems that already exist within Native communities. Okay, let's turn now to the state of Nebraska, where the U.S. Department of Agriculture, well, it has approved that state's plan to regulate hemp agriculture in Nebraska. That's right, folks. The Nebraska Department of Agriculture is going to begin accepting applications for licenses to grow, process, and sell hemp, and that's going to begin immediately, so get yourself lined up for that. You'll remember that under that 2018 Farm Bill, industrial hemp was removed from the federal list of controlled substances. The Nebraska Department of Agriculture's hemp production plan, it does allow for up to 400 hemp cultivation sites. It also allows for licenses for 270 cultivators, also 30 process handlers, and 15 brokers. Now, in order to legally qualify as hemp, you know this, plants have to have a THC concentration of no more than 0.3%. The Agriculture Department was also authorized to collect $236,000 in license fees to administer that state regulatory program. I'm Carol Angela Davis. Thanks for watching. I am Carol Angela Davis with your cannabis news. Why would anyone sell K2 laced with rat poison to customers? Well, that's exactly what convenience store owner Fuad Massoud is accused of doing. Okay, he is the owner of the King Mini Mart over on the west side of Chicago. Prosecutors say he admitted to them that he sold more than 80 packages of K2 per day. Now he's got 7 years in prison to think about it. It all started between March and April 2018. That's when the Illinois Department of Health received roughly 100 reports of hospitalizations due to severe bleeding, and they linked those symptoms. They saw a pattern. They linked them to symptoms of using so-called synthetic marijuana, or K2, or spice. You know that synthetic marijuana is synthetic, so it's made in a laboratory. It's often more potent with more severe and long-lasting effects than natural cannabis. In this case, the mixture that was used to make the synthetic marijuana contained brodifacoum. That's a deadly anticoagulant that's also used in rat poison. It causes severe internal bleeding, and its effects can last up to months and can be fatal. Well, this particular synthetic marijuana was purchased from King Mini Mart. That's the store owned by Masood. Fortunately, none of the victims of the rat poison K2 sold at Masood's shop died, but many barely escaped with their lives and nearly died from this uncontrollable bleeding. When Masood was arrested, folks, he had $344,000 in cash and about 6.4 pounds of synthetic cannabis packets branded Purple Giant in his possession. Yikes. 2 of his employees were also arrested, but they did agree to cooperate with the investigation. One showed DEA agents where Masood hid his stash of synthetic marijuana to avoid detection. It was hidden in a hole in the ground behind his shop. Well, he's paying for it now. I don't think it was worth it. I'm Carol Angela Davis. Thanks for watching. If you like the broadcast, please follow and share.